Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Bridge to the weekend. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna. Great to see you. Great to see you. This is not our usual time, as you know. This is a special episode because I won't be on for cocktail night tonight. I will remind you later, too, if you're on the page. Our Facebook page is Rug Hooking and Punch Needle Club. But I'm happy to see you this morning, and I wanted to do one extra episode this week to complete our conversation about Agnes Vermouth and her extraordinary rugs of the mid-20th century. So let's get back to that in a minute. Anita, you logged on. Good to see you. Good morning. Oh, nuclear medicine will watch. Okay, replay later. Okay, yep, absolutely. You're in the hospital. Oh, Anita, I hope it goes well. Good luck. We will see you very soon. Gayla, good to see you. Good morning. I hope everybody has a great weekend too. Absolutely. Robin, good morning from Wisconsin. I'm reading your notes at the same time. Linda, good morning. Great to see you. Cindy, great to see you. I know, poor Anita. Oh my word, Catherine. Good morning in Georgia. Great to see you. You know, the longer Beverly, good morning. Great to see you. Happy Friday. Thumbs up, everybody, please. We'll get the channel boosting. We're doing so well lately. So many people on. I know this is an odd time. I bet people will remember that we're on a little bit early today, or maybe not. We usually don't run these extra episodes, but I felt in this case that we really had to because this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and now Friday, looking at this extraordinary book about the work of one woman. These are my favorite kinds of episodes because this is somebody's life, right? This isn't like a few pieces that are hanging in a gallery with a huge price tag. This is somebody's life. And these are decades of her life that she spent working, doing, learning, evolving, her techniques, teaching. Good morning, April. Good to see you. Celebrating people who do this kind of lifelong work in the craft is super important. And keeping their names alive, like on a daily basis, just knowing who these big players are who had so much sway and influence over the way that this craft went and maintaining the craft, right? All of these teachers like Agnes who taught so many students, had people over almost every day of the week. Her contribution just cannot be measured. It doesn't have a shape. All of the students that walked away from her with a skill set that they were pleased with, who either went on to teach or made rugs that their family has or passed down, has kept it going. It's like the work of, it's like give a man a fish or a fishing rod, right? The work of one person comes down like a crazy pyramid, and it really counts, matters a lot. Good morning from Northern Illinois. Cindy, thank you so much for your message. Huge thank you to Cindy today, because the end of this episode is going to be an exciting pop. You'll see what I mean. So I want to get back into talking about Agnes. I'll keep an eye on the ticker over there on the side. We left off yesterday talking about her rugs. And Cindy pointed out that the area of Chicago that Agnes was from, where she lived in this house, with hundreds of rugs that she had made, and her many, many, many students over the years, over the decades, is predominantly Swedish. So that's interesting. You get, different pockets of ethnicities that are, it's always interesting to know where people are, right? Because I'm from Rhode Island, or I grew up mostly in Rhode Island, and there's a huge, like, Italian and Portuguese sections and areas that very predominant. So it's just interesting to know what sort of people are settled in what places. Where my dad was from, north of Boston, they were certainly French Canadian. They didn't even speak English in that neighborhood. The younger generation did, but the older didn't. They spoke French at home. So it's just interesting to see, particularly through the 20th century, how this evolves, how to map something like this, because that piece of knowledge about there being a huge Swedish population made this rug make sense to us yesterday. The rug that she designed, called Sweden, made sense in terms of color. Try to get the glare off. In terms of color and design, because it has a striking resemblance to toll painting, right, which is Scandinavian, but particularly Swedish styles of toll painting, right? Painting on wood, decorative painting on metal too, trays and all that kind of things. Also super popular in the 20th century, in the middle 20th century. That all makes sense, right? In clicks. Christine, good to see you. You're at your mom and dad's beginning your birthday weekend. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Tell your dad I'm going to get that special order out to him probably on Monday. And I just want to remind you, I've already said I won't be on tonight. I'll probably pop up in a live video just to remind people later. But I'm going to be at my mom's tonight, and my sister and I are going to get the tree for her and get that going with the lights and do that hard part of that, get that up for some festive time. So after this episode, I will see you again on Monday. And I will be recording the dye video for those of you who have bought the, and the Hawkings, and the stockings were hung dye class. In all stockings dye class, right, where you get like 10 stockings and this huge dye kit in the mail according to the one that you choose. Those will be going out early next week too. Oh, before I forget, my God, the crackers. I'm already counting how many crackers I have because I posted the crackers at like 11 o'clock last night. These are available on Ribbon Candy Hooking and yeah, ribboncandyhooking.com. It's on the Facebook page too, the link. I should have put the link in here. But you know, these, yeah, I'll do it right after. So these are the crackers that have a proddy tool in them, the paper crown, and the fortune-telling fish. And I put them up for 18 because I have to give this stuff to Erin, who's the employee, who's fantastic, who's helping a ton to do them all. And there's a bunch of proddy strips in here, but we found last night when we started working on the prototypes that I couldn't get enough proddy pieces in here. So each cracker will come in a bag. The things I mentioned are in here, but there'll be tons more strips of proddy in the bag. So it'll be like a big confetti bag. Be careful when you open it, right? Don't open it with scissors. This is your cracker to pop it, but don't open it with scissors because, you know, there's fabric in there too, in the fortune-telling fish, in the paper crown, and the proddy tool, most important. So that'll be super fun. Those were selling like crazy overnight. I think we're at 15 or 20 now have sold. So I'll just check and be sure that there are lots more because they're flying off the shelves. Merry Christmas and happy holidays, right? Courtney, great to see you. Oh, did he, Christine? Charlie, he's so sweet. What a sweet, smart guy to chat with. And Cindy says, years ago, there was a toll painting show during Swedish days, if you remember correctly. That is so interesting. So, Cindy, I hope it's okay if I say this. Stop me if I say too much. But Cindy sent the most beautiful email to me last night after yesterday's episode. And it was almost like emotional because it was so much information that supplemented this conversation we've been having this week about Agnes and her life and her work. And Cindy, being local to this area, was able to shed more light on the sort of Swedish connection. And she also sent me a link to Agnes's house. So that's a to be continued later in this episode. That's how I'll close the episode. It was like crazy emotional for me looking at the pictures of the inside of her house and the outside. That's the thumbnail for today's episode. Because I feel like we know her at this point. And it feels like it was yesterday, 1986, that all of these pictures were taken because I've been thinking about her so much, and you probably have too. So it was super helpful getting that email, Cindy. And Cindy was saying when she was, you know, back in the day doing a bit more quilting, having young kids at home, didn't take a class with Agnes, but your friend Peg did, right? And you said that you had always regretted not having taken a class with Agnes, but your friend Peg did. And at the time you had small kids, and she said they were taking walks around the neighborhood and looking at like the really fancy houses in the neighborhood. I do that too. I just did that on Thanksgiving in my sister's neighborhood. It's so much fun to go out for a walk and look at like the best streets. But just such a beautiful picture, such a pretty picture, thinking about Cindy and Peg out walking. You know, in these neighborhoods outside. It's outside Chicago, right? Fairly close to Chicago. But, and then Peg taking the classes with Agnes. It's just, it's not long ago, but it still is a moment in time, isn't it? Because it marks, like, for me, like, you know, being a young teenager at that point, it's that same sort of era. And it's not a long time ago as the crow flies, right? But it just seems very nostalgic all the same. And beautiful stories came out of there. Crystal! It's Friday. Yeah, on Friday morning. So, and Crystal, we might have some news coming up too, but I won't shoot my mouth off yet, but I'm super excited. Subtle winks that I do, right, in between sips of Monster salted caramel. Mm. So, where we left off, we were talking about the styles of rugs she did, and knowing that she did hundreds, we've already looked at the Oriental ones, right? The florals, and her favorite genre, which was the floral geometric, because she loved geometrics and she loved florals. And remember, according to her granddaughter who wrote this book, Elizabeth, starting with the second rug she ever worked on, that second rug was her original design, and so were all of the ones that followed. So that's interesting to know because she is choosing elements of existing rugs, rug patterns, including frosts, right? We know that from yesterday's episode. And she is sort of creating composites, right? Adding things that she likes, like the big fruit one on the back of the book, adding elements that she likes, embellishing, taking away. She's creating compositions based on existing patterns by the look of things that are popular at that time. And she's doing things that she feels like doing in that moment. She's inspired by her willow platter that she serves with, right? A piece of like dishware. She's inspired by Picasso. She's inspired by a wide range of outside sort of art sources. The Wuthering Heights, remember that woodcut? So it's interesting to look at her work, and we are only seeing not even a scratch on the surface of the volume of work that she did, but the different categories that she would work within. So for example, right now we're about to look at what are classified as the early Americans. Now, when Pearl McGowan did these, she was calling them Jacobean or Crewel, Crewel, inspired patterns. But for Agnes, she's referring to them, or she did refer to them as the early American style, which also fits. That fits just fine because if we think about what early American textiles look like in the 17th and 18th century, we are talking about Jacobean inspired designs all around. Really, Tudor and Jacobean, way behind the times, but it's just the way that it worked, right? So early American designs, including, we're going to look at quaint, floral, and vineyard. Very similar color palettes, very similar to what we saw Pearl McGowan putting out in the exact same years. Early 60s, the second one is 1968. So let's first look at quaint floral. It contains muted earth tones and stylized flowers. And again, very Jacobean. Oh, book is cracking right open. Very Jacobean in style. It's this one here. Where's my hand? There we go. Book is cracking right in half. So, you know, I'm going to say the thing that I like, I've seen a lot of these as McGowan patterns. We all have, right? What I like about this is it appears to me that she turned it. In other words, doesn't this look like if you turned it from being this orientation, like right now it looks a bit portrait, like the opening is a portrait style opening, the oval. If you turned it the other way and you had the oval the long way, it would be a flat out Pearl McGowan style design, wouldn't it? But the fact that she's turned it and given it this different orientation, portrait versus landscape, you know, and she's made such a small center oval, gave her the opportunity to drop in these massive amounts of vines and flowers. And that really does make the rug exquisite. This is another example of one of Agnes's rugs where if I ever got a hold of this pattern that she drew with her hand, I would save it, trace it, and remember how I would recommend tracing it, and for you too, I would not work directly on her burlap for myself because I would want to have it stretched like professionally and put up on the wall forevers, like never to be touched again, just admired. But I would take that pattern first and I would put it down on the table and I would get a bunch of those cheap frames like that, the plastic plexiglass that are in posters that you get from Walmart or Goodwill or whatever, like the flimsy, flexible plastic, put it over the piece and trace it with a Sharpie, right? And then get into transferring it. You don't want to pull the design directly off an old piece of burlap that somebody has hand drawn with a hat pin and a squeegee, right? Or no matter what the technique is, it's better to get something clear in between you and an old pattern, not for the sake of ruining the pattern, although to me that's the main worry, but for the sake of getting it very clear and tight as well, it's nice to be able to use something like the plexiglass because you can get a couple pieces or you can just transfer it bit by bit, right? So that's what I would do if I was going to take a design like this. And then for myself, like with some of our designs yesterday, it was very sort of unexpected and irregular space in the middle. I would be so tempted to put initials or a little house or the year or something like that. But she didn't. She really stuck to the early American look, right? In her own words. And this is the grapes. So very similar palette to this, almost interchangeable. But we know, being who she was, that she must have dyed an exquisite amount of purple colors to get this ombre range of purples and, again, like spice brown. And then the greens, right? Like the Reseda green, some of these older greens that we don't see as much of. But that Cushing does really well. There's a few colors in my mind like myrtle green, spice, mummy brown, Reseda, that Cushing does, wood rose. There's a few old ones in my mind that have not been duplicated, and nobody's even come close to getting the sort of, if it makes sense, round charm of those early colors. You know what I mean? Like when you drink a glass of tea and it almost tastes like round. It's such a complete flavor to it. And the same with these colors. There's something so distinctive about several of the Cushings. Not all for me, but several of the old ones are really extraordinary. And a few more of these early American ones. Well, this one is called Viking, done in 1961. This is just amazing. Again, a lot of mummy brown and spice brown here. And definitely like the gold, the old gold, possibly the gold nugget, the silver gray. I mean, I recognize these colors easily because they're very distinctive. Moving into the rust, right? Cushing does a lovely rust brown too. And you see the browns put together in the scroll. You see the rust on the bottom and more of the mummy on the top. Really, this is going into the 70s, isn't it? These heavy yellows and browns in combo going right into the 70s for that palette, the Brady Bunch palette. Exquisite. So now the next chapter moves toward birds and animals. And again, she's really keeping with Jacobean/Cruel style design. So she's really pulling from earlier English decoration sources like textiles, tapestries, obviously within textiles, but real specific look. And again, this was the look that was a signature Pearl McGowan look at that time. Now, it never says in this book whether, it says that Agnes had taken classes. I would be amazed if she was not Pearl McGowan certified. Maybe I'll ask Donna Swanson about that at Whispering Hill in Woodstock, because she's Pearl McGowan certified and she's been a member for decades. So maybe I'll ask her how one finds out about that, because I'd like to put the bits that her granddaughter did not include in this part biographical, part sort of portfolio book about Agnes. The parts that she kind of omitted, I don't think were intentional. They're parts that wouldn't have occurred to her to be important or important later. So like for me, as somebody who's interested in the history of this craft and creating like a very rambling and mostly blank tree of all of these very important hookers and teachers earlier in the 20th century, to get them into place and to find out what sort of pedigree, not pedigree in terms of being a snob, but just knowing where they came from and who they taught with, because remember, there were other people at that time who taught who were not nearly as successful or visible as Pearl McGowan, but there were other teachers around. So makes me curious. It's part of the puzzle that is right around the river bend, that would be easy to find out, I think, with just a little bit of footwork, which, yeah. And by the way, I'm not setting projects up for anybody, but if anybody ever has chances or stumbles upon these like little connections, please let me know or let us know on Coffee Time so we can rejig all of this. I try to document things as I find them and get a more complete puzzle. It's going to take a few decades for me too, God willing, to get more of this in place. But I think it's important to nail it down, right? Because we have been pretty invisible for a long time. Cindy says, Peg took a class from, from Sue Hamer, who took a class from Agnes. So one generation out. But that feeds into that whole conversation about Agnes teaching so many people and then the people she taught teaching. It's so interesting, isn't it? It's how it works. It's so interesting. And I think it was much more of a thing in middle to late 20th century, taking a class. Now we are so computer oriented. It's just, many people will either Zoom to do Zoom classes, or they will watch YouTube videos, right? So it's just done differently now. But I think at this point, it was so important for people to be able to see the thing in front of their eyes. And many people learned that way, and not from a book or from a video. And, it's good to know how you learn and how you prefer to learn and what's more successful for you, because then you know what to sign up for, right? There's no point in taking a Zoom class if you know, even if it's recorded, that it's not going to click if you can't see the person's eyes, right? Everybody works differently, but this school of teachers at this time was incredibly important. And at this point, this came up in our conversation, I think on Monday or even last week, about certifications within both punch needle and rug hooking. And, it comes down to the fact that I think at this point, there are still a lot of people certified. So you can certainly take classes with certified teachers, and it's very easy to find them in the back of Rug Hooking Magazine, right? But it's also becoming more common for people like me, not certified, teaching a lot, right? And it really depends on what kind of person you are and what you want from your teacher. If you want this from your teacher, then you definitely want a Pearl McGowan certified teacher. They're going to have this better than anybody. If you want a teacher who teaches something specific, like a specific style, a specific sort of philosophy in approaching, right? That's more what I do than this. Then you want that teacher or someone like that teacher. It really depends. For myself, when I sign up for a class with anybody else, I'm not signing up because the person has diplomas or certifications. I'm signing up because I already know their work and I love their work, and there's something about them that I can't put my finger on, but I want it. And I'm hoping that being near them or learning from them is going to shed some light on that elusive thing that they have that I love so much. So it really depends, right? When you're a student and you're looking for a teacher, the main thing is for there to be more people teaching rug hooking so that there are more rug hookers, right? That is what's going to save us as a craft. So she does a little more on soapbox over. She does a little more on animals and things like that. And these are very sweet too. These are, again, quite small for her. Epic style worker, epic scale, right? Ducks over water. I wish, I'm going to try to do a little research on her and her family. I would love to know from moment to moment how she worked in terms of inspiration, because this book really covers technically, what she made and how she made it. But when her granddaughter, Elizabeth, the author of this book, says that this is a very diverse book, and that her work was very diverse and inspired by many things and people and places, I want to hear more about that personally. Like, how do we go from a Jacobean tree, a partridge in a pear tree, to ducks flying over the water or an American eagle emblem, right? I mean, it's just, I just wonder, or the illustration from Wuthering Heights. Or the Picasso head. Like, I just wonder what she was like more as a person than a maker. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'd like to hear more about that part of her, how she went from one thing to the next, because she doesn't seem like a kind of will-o'-the-wisp person, like a flibberty-gibbet type person. She doesn't seem like she's all over the map like I am, like up and down and crazy and backward and forward. She seemed like she was fairly regimented, and controlled, right? So I would love to know what kinds of books she read and what kind of art she liked to look at besides Picasso, to know more about her personally and why she chose the subjects that she chose. If she felt like, I have a hole in my portfolio, I don't have enough horses, let's do some horses. If she worked that way, or if she thought more like, boy, I've been on a Picasso bender and I can't get off, what a ride. That would be interesting to know that too. Hey, Tara, good to see you. And then stuff like this, unexpected. This reminds me of remember the old, I hope you don't, I hope you weren't smoking anyway, the cigarette packets that had like those little sort of faux velvet label things that came with them that people would turn it into crazy quilts or use for coasters or whatever. They did a whole series of animal skins. Do you remember that? And this looks like one of them because they were rectangles because they were like miniature rugs, rather than being shaped, right, like an animal. And this absolutely looks like one of those little animal skins. And then we've got this one, super sweet image, the two-sided Ace of Hearts. So good, right? So good. And that makes me think, did she play bridge? Did she have buddies over that she played cards with that night? So nice. Now, these are faces, so this is like so much harder, and for me, right? For her, maybe not, probably not. But the thing about these faces that makes them super unusual is that she's done a very articulated, realistic face, and she has not hooked the background of any of them. So it's just the burlap background. So let's look at this, and she's got them in portrait frames, right? So this one is called Rosemary. I don't know if that's after the song. I think there was something else called Rosemary. Maybe it's a family member. Was the movie, it was called New Moon, wasn't it? Not Rosemary. But this is certainly after, I think this is like, not a Bruegel. Who's the artist on this? It begins with a B, doesn't it? Like early Renaissance painter or late medieval painter. Gosh, who's that? Something the elder or the younger, right? The Madonna with Child. That's a famous one. Maybe it says. I'll look in a second. This looks like a Gainsborough to me. This last one with the girl with the hat. I don't know. Maybe we're getting some more clues. Getting the answer to the question right here. Okay, so Rosemary was the top one, not Rosemary. And the religious one was Little Madre. And the third one was called Sweet 16. So the hooked rugs ceased to be rugs and became pictures when she started doing portraits. The bare burlap here sets off the faces very well. The sources of the faces are probably from cards or magazine pictures. A savor of postcards, greeting cards, and magazines, she always has a ready supply of new ideas. Well, that definitely answers my question. So it sounds like she's doing a bit of mid-century hoarding of sources, right? And this is such a classic. If you go to antique stores, you do find scrapbooks where people have been scrapping it out for years and cutting out everything pretty, right? With no particular theme, a lot of pretty things cut and taped down or glued down into the pages of a scrapbook. And then you go back to them for whenever you need to see something pretty. But for Agnes, she goes back to them when she's looking for her next design. So that makes a lot of sense because certainly those, the top one looks like Audrey Hepburn, really, but it's called Rosemary. And then Little Madre, I'm sure, is taken from something that's on the tip of my tongue. It's going to drive me nuts. And yeah, Sweet 16, if I would bet a lot of money that that's based on a Gainsborough. So they would be on playing cards, wouldn't they? This would be the kind of art that you would see in magazines and on cards and postcards and things like that. And then she's got Black Woman's Head. I'm about to show you these. That one she hooked the background of. That is extraordinarily good. Madonna and Child, and this looks like it's taken from, for example, like a Mexican reliquary. And the last one is called Turkish Man. So let's look at these. That might be like a cigarette pack. Knowing what we know now, let me show you this set of three. Try to get rid of the shadow here. I'm going to have to fool around with the lighting. The lighting seems tough the last couple days. I guess with the sun changing and the seasons, changing, I'm getting different light. So you see how on what one was this called? Black Woman's Head. Not sure that I love that title, but it is what it is. She's hooked everything, right? And here, she's almost done this feather tufting thing in the background, right? She's only hooked parts of it, but that's really clever. What a lot of height. This really looks obviously like a reliquary or some kind of iconic painting. It's very different. I think those sort of cotton-taily, cat-taily things in the background, those puffs of white, really help further the feel of this. It looks South American to me, but it has a Persian feel. So I'm not sure what the source for that was, but it's exotic and it's really pretty. The frame helps a lot with the character of the subject, doesn't it? And Turkish man. That looks a lot like a magazine ad, doesn't it? Like a magazine illustration. I mean, or it could easily be like an Arabian Nights too. I said cigarette packet, but it could easily be an Arabian Nights without a doubt. Interesting. I'm trying to think of the name of the illustrator who illustrated Arabian Nights in like the 1900s, 1900s. Because it really looks like that style. And then she's got a Japanese lady, Japanese beautiful gown, and it says, her fascination for Oriental subjects and styles is evident in many of the rugs and pictures. So, beautiful geisha. This certainly looks like it's a Japanese woodblock or something like that. I feel like I've seen this before as a print, and this as well. So, I'm guessing because we're seeing things that are very similar to what their sources are, I'm going to just repeat that the copyright issue, there has been such a thing as copyright for a long time, right? But the usage has changed over the years, and the rules to copyright, is a moving target. We recently changed from 100 years after the person's death to, I think, or is it the other way around, 50? I can't remember, but I know Canada also has recently changed the copyright law by like 25 years. So it's a moving target. And at this time, most of the artists that she's using in the 20th century have been dead for 100 years. I think the copyright was less back in the day, or not at all, for quite a while. So I don't think there was ever any issue with the usage here, making copies of art that were already quite old pieces. So I don't want that to come up as a thing. Susie, good to see you. Her mastery of rug hooking is perhaps most evident in her reproduction of Picasso's Picasso head. And we looked at that. I'll show you that again. And then another head at the bottom, girl in an oval frame. This is, she's choosing frames that are very fitting to her subject. So she's got the Picasso head, and remember how she tried to actually emulate Picasso's brush strokes in executing this piece. So there was more than just filling in the colors paint by number, right? She was really trying to evoke his work in terms of how he worked, his method. And this is the Egyptian piece in an oval frame it looks kind of lacquery, kind of cut, right? Really filigree, really fitting for the subject. She's very good at that, isn't she? Imagine how happy she must have been when she was working on a piece and then she found the perfect frame for it. It says straight line hooking and contour line hooking are well used here to differentiate the various textures of landscape in this very detailed scene. So we're moving into landscapes, and we're talking about this piece called, this is fantastic, Harvest Time, Monks. God, I don't know what the source on this is. This was 1950. Let me know if you do. There's got to be a really obvious source on this. I don't know why I don't recognize this, but do you recognize this? That is absolutely gorgeous. And it has, unlike most of her pieces, a folk art quality, right? The shape of the monks is almost like, they look like bells, almost. And then the cluster of cows, very awkward, kind of made to fit each other, a little bit on the folky side. The line of evergreens, very folky. This is the most folky composition I've seen of hers, and so far this is my favorite piece of hers, I think, as a result. Absolutely beautiful. Isn't that extraordinary? And again, she's using, bless you, she's using that really classic Cushing palette of dyes. And, it says at the beginning she does use Cushing, because there's also the diamond dyes. There's other choices, right? But she's using Cushing, and it's really clear what some of these colors are. They're the same colors. They had less colors then, as you can imagine. They've gotten more over time. They had a ton, but there's even more now. This other one, the bottom one, it's called Peaceful, 1957. And I don't know what the source is for this either, but I have to say these are my favorite two that we've seen so far. That is just extraordinary. Look at the shape of the trees. They almost look like clouds. Look at the shape of the trunks. It's very lyrical, isn't it? Very peaceful, very lyrical. It's absolutely beautiful. I just don't think composition gets any better than that. And in the case of peaceful, having just one or two colors with the ivory color, very limited palette, absolutely beautiful. And it doesn't go toward the Delft look, right? It doesn't go toward that kind of, whether you're talking about blue Delft or the sort of eggplant color or any color that they did. It doesn't look like that. It goes more toward the wood print, doesn't it? With a real sort of definition. Covered Bridge. Now these look like two Currier and Ives. Covered Bridge 1954 and Sleigh Ride 1970. So a couple more, definitely more in the Currier and Ives, judging from the trees that look like asparagus. Nothing wrong with that, just the style, right? Looking more Currier and Ives, and certainly this is very recognizable, Sleigh Ride. Beautifully done too. So I think we're getting to the end here. Oh, another one, Homestead in Winter. Gosh, this looks like the one that's actually by Currier and Ives called, I think it's called Home for Thanksgiving. Let me know if you agree with that. I'm not an expert on Currier and Ives, but Home for Thanksgiving is their most famous and best-selling print of all time, even over Sleigh Ride. And to me, that looks just like, in my memory, Home for Thanksgiving. And then this one down here is called Angel in the Sky Messenger. That is beautiful. Is that, see, this has got me again. I want to say like it looks like a Chagall, but it doesn't exactly. So if you have sources for any of these that I'm showing that are holes in my knowledge, please jump into the thread and let us know. This is a beautiful image. Absolutely beautiful. I love how it captures the angel right over the church steeple. And the city, the suggestion of the city. We often see angels and clouds all lofty up there, in the heavens, but you don't often get an image of an angel over a city skyline. And I think that's quite beautiful and important to see that kind of diversity in where angels might decide to visit, right? They visit everywhere, I'm sure. And then this is that last print that we've already seen, the Wuthering Heights black and white woodcut that was extraordinary, completely hooked in black and white. Hooked. So this is the book that we have been feasting on all week, The Hooked Rugs of Agnes Vermouth, or I'm probably saying that wrong. I'm saying it the German way, but I don't know. I've just loved this book immensely. This has been like the Rosetta Stone for so many things that we've talked about. In terms of technique and calling things by more than one name. They're calling it something in here and we know it is something else now. There's been so many instances of that just going through this book. And her work is extraordinary. Hundreds of rugs made by one person. What a lifetime of work, right? I mean, it just beautiful. I've loved this book, and I hope that if you are looking for it, that you are finding it, because it is getting to be as scarce as hen's teeth. Now, Cindy, thank you so much for sending this link to Agnes's actual home, right? It just sold in 2021, I think for about $270. It was outside, again, is saying outside Chicago, is that close enough? In Geneva, right, Illinois. I want to show you some pictures of the house, because don't you feel like we've been there for this entire week? I feel like I've been in the basement of this house, rootling around, looking at her hundreds of rugs and spending time with her. And I had a sort of picture in my head as to what the house looked like. I was picturing like this wacky old kind of Victorian house, and it's not at all. It's a really adorable, what looks like a kind of 1930s house to me. This is my absolute dream house on the outside and the inside. So let's take a quick little tour of Agnes's actual house. It's empty in these pictures, right? So that gives us some kind of clue as to family history. Hold your breath. So this is the exterior. And to me, this is the perfect house. If I were to draw my dream house, it would look just like this. Like a little happy box with a dormer up top. And inviting steps going in where you can put pumpkins and a flag, just like this. And then when you go in, Beautiful windows and doors. Opportunity for a fireplace. I don't know what the colors were in her day when she was living here, but there's hardwood floors all through the house. I could see that from the pictures. And there's more than one fireplace. All the fireplaces look similar. The sort of early to mid-century look, right? This stone look, very simple, very heading toward modern. This is the back of the house, so you can see what a rambler it is. Well, the side, right? Because here's the flag over on the other side. It's a rambler. Beautiful house. It could be a little older, actually. This looks older to me than this. They might have updated the front at one point. And I know that you're wondering, Geneva is west of Chicago. Okay, thanks, Cindy. I know that you're wondering about one thing in particular, and let's do that last. Let's look first at a little more of the house. I'm doing sneaky origami here because I don't want to spoil the last picture. So here's another room. Now, I just looked at these for so long because I was just picturing Agnes walking through, and I was picturing all of her rugs that weren't in the basement hanging up on these walls. So much light, right? So many windows and doors, so much light. And then we've got this kind of thing, like almost Spanish-inspired rounded doorways. Lots of built-ins all over the house. There's tons and tons and tons of pictures online. Little steps, right? Steps up, steps down, creating so much interest. And then I have to say, I know most people wouldn't agree with me, but this is my dream kitchen right here. When I go into a house or I see a house that looks like the Property Brothers have been in with their sledgehammers, it just gives me stomach cramps and makes me want to run. I love to find a house like this that has like original cabinets and nobody's been fooling around destroying stuff for no reason. These cabinets would make me very happy with all of the little, holiday stuff on top that you don't go to every day, and then the stuff you use every day lower down. I wonder if the same person who built her cabinets in the basement built these cabinets too, right? Because this is some fancy cabinetry. So are you wondering what I was wondering and worrying about as I flipped through these pictures? And my stomach was like so tight and worried because we have looked at so many pictures in this book of her beautiful handmade basement where she had all of those wooden drawers and cubbies, hundreds of them, built in all the way around her workroom to accommodate her hundreds of rugs, right? And all of these pictures of her, we see all of these things that she had built in for her work, all this custom stuff. And remember how we said, wouldn't it be awful if some pig went in there, like, I'm not going to say it again, but the PBs, with a sledgehammer and just destroyed everything in sight just to be cool and create an open floor plan? Well, it didn't happen in this case. The last picture in the series is this. Only the one, but you can see that the built-ins are still in the basement. Nobody was a pig and stupid enough to destroy like this kind of beauty. Now, these are not going to have rugs in them anymore. And in a way, it's sad to see the empty basement when we've seen this picture so many times this week with rugs draped over. You couldn't even see the pine, right? You couldn't even see all this pine because the rugs covered the room. But at least it's still here. At least it's still here. Somebody just bought the house, and hopefully they aren't going to do anything bad to this piece of rug hooking history. I hope somebody writes to them and sends them, this episode and says, this is so important to us as rug hookers that this is part of our story and our history, and it deserves to be there. This was like the vault that held some of the most important work and hundreds of original designs, right, in our rug hooking history. So we need to get on that in 2022, figure out how to close the deal a little more on Agnes's story, because it was not that long ago. We should have a little bit more. Crystal, happy ending, huh? I hope whoever lives there next has the hobby that requires storing. Yeah, many little things, I agree. And yeah, that whole, I agree with the open floor plan thing. Everybody feels differently. And I know the force behind this idea of the open floor plan is I'm guessing, because I can't identify with it all, but I'm thinking it's you get to see, for example, your kids or your family all the time because there's no walls. My feeling is lots of little rooms are better because I don't need to see everyone's face all the time. There's nobody on this earth whose face I need to see all the time. And a wall in between, it's almost like, have you ever seen the musical The Fantastics with the fence, right? Um, yeah, a fence is good. A fence is good, right? It's a metaphor, but it's also just, it's healthy. It's a good ending, right? Aren't you happy and relieved to know that her house, even though she was born in the 1890s, I haven't pulled up her history yet. I have to dig there too. I don't know. I'm assuming that she has passed, right? Because it would be extraordinary. She would be in the Guinness Book of World Records if it weren't the case. May she rest in peace, of course. But it's good to know that part of the physical history of her life story is still intact, because it would have broken my heart to get down to the basement and see like a bare romper room, right? So yay. Well, happy Friday, everybody. And I will probably log on, like I said, later today to remind the people who weren't with us this morning that there is no cocktail time tonight. And I'm sorry about that. We're doing some family stuff, holiday stuff tonight. But I will be back with you on Monday for a coffee time at our regular time, which is noon Eastern Standard Time. And in the meantime, have a fantastic weekend. Remember, those crackers are up for sale. Oh, I forgot to do the swatch thing again. I had the, what was it, the lime pie or the key lime pie or something for you. We'll do that on Monday. But there's 1 or 2 swatch sets left if you're interested in getting the Food, Glorious Food swatch set. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you. We will have a great evening. I love to be with my mom and my sister, just the 3 girls, and the sushi, of course. So have a great weekend, everybody. I will see you on Monday. If you need me before then, check Ribbon Candy Hooking. That's where the crackers are, and I'll also post a link to that as soon as I log off to this description of this video, so you don't have to go too far.